somehow I ended up leaving Texas when I was 25, and I haven't looked back, and I've been stuck over in England for the past, I don't know, 12 years. Got involved in Formula One as a performance engineer pretty much straight after joining the industry. I worked at Force India for 3 years, working with Perez, Checo, and Paul di Resta, and then I moved to Red Bull to be Sebastian's performance engineer, and then he decided he wanted to go to Ferrari because I was joining or something like that. So I ended up working with Daniil Kvyat and Max Verstappen for a bit, and then I kind of, you mentioned in the intro a little bit of racing fatigue. You guys have that a lot harder than F1 though, but I think also there's something about the calendars being all over the place, double, triple headers, flyaways. I mean, Vegas is a back-to-back race with Abu Dhabi. What the actual heck is that? Like, that's actual chaos. So
one desert area to another, basically.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
What is the road crew like in NASCAR? We have the road crew, right, and we have the shop guys. What is the road crew schedule like between Abu Dhabi and Vegas? How many people are going on the road, and what's their schedule going to Abu Dhabi, coming from Abu Dhabi? Where do they go after that, and then when do they come to the U.S.?
So there's a big load of stuff. There's people that they call them truckies in Europe in Formula One. The truckies, and those will be the guys that they used to drive the trucks, but hardly any of them drive trucks anymore. They'll be out there setting up the garages, electrical, IT, all that stuff that goes into that every weekend. And then a lot of teams, those guys will fly back. Then the race mechanics and everybody else will run up to the event. And the cars will be arriving in a relatively prepared state, depending on if it's a flyaway or not. The guys will build the cars up. The engineers will show up on, I think, Thursday. They'll go through all the setup, patching, checking notes, driver fit, setup sheets and all that. Legality patch checking, all the suspension and bodywork is in compliance. And then they go racing on Friday. And then for engineers, you're out of there usually Sunday night if it's a European race, or Monday morning if it's a flyaway, and you're straight back in the office right after that, or in transit to the next place. So it's I think the most I ever did was 21 races in a season, and that was exhausting. But you guys on 40 weekends or something, you guys are nuts.
Well, so do they race or do they fly private or commercial, or how's the
commercial?
Really?
Almost
okay, so even for the short
commercial. Yep.
Even for the short flights around Europe, there's no private flights?
No.
Interesting.
During COVID, they would charter flights, and then if there's some places that are not particularly popular, they will, charter a plane for several teams. But for the most part, you're always flying commercial in F1, which is a bit of drag.
And let's real quick on that point. So, bring it back to this upcoming Vegas F1 race. We were talking about the timing of it all. Well, practice is at like 1 a.m. or something as well. And so I saw a wonderful tweet from Will Buxton that was like dealing with the time change and the jet lag. And someone said, "How do you do it?" And he said, "I do 9 months of hell, and then I get sick. I get the flu, and then my family shows up for Christmas." I was like, honestly, if that doesn't describe the grind of, by the way, I literally just woke up last night and I'm sick. So, and we just ended our season a week ago. So like, it's just such a good time. It's the way this goes. But for you, having worked there, like what are these crew guys going to go through with the timing of all this? I mean, they're going to be there till 4 a.m., 5 a.m. some nights.
It's the trick. The only race I can speak to that was like this was when we do Singapore. And the trick was Friday night. I think you'd be leaving the circuit at something like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And if it was a late one, you're kind of like, oh no. Everybody's aim was like, get back to the hotel before the sun comes up, because if you see the sunlight, you're going to be completely screwed for the next day and you won't be able to sleep. So you see people walking back at 5 o'clock in the morning from the racetrack to their hotels that are like a 15-minute walk away in sunglasses. I'm like, you guys are weird, but it makes sense. It totally makes sense when you get done over by seeing the sunlight and you can't sleep, and then you've got free practice 3 and qualifying on Saturday and you're nowhere. It's like, what happened? Oh, I saw the sun last night. Oh.
So let me. I would talk more about the Las Vegas GP here in a little bit. But tell me what a performance engineer is in Formula One. That title. What does that title mean?
So I think in a lot of other series, like sports cars in the US and probably IndyCar and NASCAR, you might have a data engineer or performance engineer is what they'd call it. But I think in F1, it's probably quite similar to IndyCar as well. You'll have an engineer that's focused on the detailed performance characteristics of the car and the driver's performance, and you are working directly with the race engineer to optimize a single car. So when I was at the track, I worked on one car at a time, and I'd collaborate with the other car in between sessions, but during the session my focus was Max or Danny's performance, the car's performance, and looking at everything from fuel management, tire, to an extent brakes performance and brakes management in terms of the tools like the brake-by-wire system and all of that, the differential settings. Those were all in my wheelhouse, as well as driver performance, looking at the driver versus his teammate, offering advice during practice sessions, qualifying, working with him after the session, and then during the session helping the race engineer focus on car operation, traffic management, and communicating with the driver, and strategic things and tire management.
And does the driver have a dedicated either driver coach or driver performance engineer that you work with, or is it sort of the engineers of the team? Yeah, I mean, I would say you're not the only performance engineer, in the garage, right, for that one team. So, how do you filter that, who the priority engineer is that communicates with the driver when it comes to driver stuff?
That's an interesting one. I think so. In a lot of series, you will have a driver coach, and that person is always coordinating with the driver from that point of view. But I think a couple of teams have a driver performance coach in F1, but it's really, really not that common. And I'm kind of some of them, I'm a little bit skeptical of the arrangement, considering usually very few of them have driven F1, and they haven't driven open wheel cars in a very, very long time. So it's like, that's an interesting arrangement. But for the most part, I would talk to the race engineer about things. He would talk to me about things, and we would come up with an arrangement or a system of how we communicated to the driver with performance. Because maybe the race engineer was busy going through ballast and setup sheets, and he's like, hey, can you walk Max through those laps that you showed me earlier, and just show him what he's doing relative to his teammate, or where he's maybe leaving some time on the board, or walk him through the tire prep on that and how we can optimize that for qualifying in 30 minutes kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny in NASCAR, you have that age-old conversation between the driver and his engineers, or the driver and the crew chief, which is like, hey, you need to carry more min speed, or we need to, I'll even use real NASCAR terminology. It's like, hey, we need to roll the middle faster. You need to pick up the throttle sooner. we need you to get to wide open throttle, man.
Come on, why don't you go drive it?
Usually that's a really good way to get the driver to cuss you out.
Yeah, it's like
it also
my favorite one is my favorite saying is, the car's going as fast as it can. It's like, that's very interesting because your teammate's about 3 miles an hour faster through that corner. So if you'd like to try again, please go for it.
Right. That's the worst thing you could say. So for the driver coaching, in IndyCar, you mentioned it, that actually has become very prevalent. Teams have their own driver coaches. Drivers now have their own coaches. I think in NASCAR, we're very close to driver coaching becoming almost an individualized thing per driver, or by team. Right now we're at the manufacturer level, but it's going to get competitive, and people are going to start to want their person and them to help them. But let's, we kind of alluded to it. Let's dive into this Vegas GP, because there's a lot of things technically that you can talk about that Landon and I don't know as much about so well. And that is, one, this track is a unique design. There's a lot of talk about the temperatures and the conditions that these drivers are going to be experiencing, the teams. There's no support races running on the track, which is brand new asphalt. So, I mean, there's a lot of things going against this in terms of being raceable conditions. And I guess my question, though, is like, in IndyCar, they have like 100-degree rule, which is the track temp plus the ambient temp combined to 100. That's when they're allowed to run. And that's Fahrenheit, by the way. Does F1 have a minimum temp? No,
nothing like that.
So what's happening? How do you tackle this?
Let's start through the top of this, because I think you touched on all the super, super important points. It's, first of all, it's fresh tarmac or asphalt. If you roll back to Austin 2012, when Formula One first came to Circuit of the Americas, that was brand new tarmac. And it was a really chilly morning. And I remember it's like, I was so excited to be at home, doing work. And then the guys are like, there is absolutely zero grip. So that presents a really interesting challenge in terms of setting up the car, because roughly for this type of circuit, this is where you should be with, your tools and the car setup. But everything that's happening is dominated by the tires not having any grip. So you're like, okay, do we chase this so it's drivable and get lost, or do we let the track come to us? And reality is you do a combination of both. And the second factor in that is the circuit is mostly low speed corners and several long straights. So those are, two big problems. Is there's no high speed cornering content, or very little, which is where F1 tires generate most of their temperature that makes the grip usable. And then, you've got the huge back straight down the Las Vegas Strip into a huge braking zone. You'll probably be going well over 200 miles an hour on freezing cold tires, slamming on the brakes. And you probably haven't had a whole lot of time to put any energy into the brakes as well, which means those will be very interesting. So those are kind of like the two things. It's like none of those things are good for generating grip. And then you don't have any support series to help polish off the top of that tarmac to expose, those stones so you can properly get adhesion off of them. It's going to be chaos. And I think you'll see teams just kind of struggling through free practice 1, free practice 2, like we call them the long runs, or the high fuel race preparation runs. Those are going to be even more useless than usual. And I honestly think it's going to be chaos. And maybe not in a bad way, though. Huh. Maybe not in a bad way.
Well, and it does bring up, we can dive into sort of who you think is going to be fast and that sort of thing, who maybe it suits. But just quickly, I'm curious, though, with all that, with the long straightaway, where in the downforce spectrum do you put this one? Like, what do you expect teams to be seeing from their simulation as to being high downforce, low downforce configuration?
Very low. Not
so that
not
adds to
Monza low, but like maybe in the realms of Spa, because Spa, you've got that compromise of you've got lots of long straights, but you also have some medium and high speed corners. So the closest thing I can think of is Baku. You've got a track where Sector 1 and Sector 2 are mostly low speed 90-degree corners, and then you've got this huge, nearly 2 kilometer long straight, just under a mile. And it's like, with all the lap time is there. And you saw McLaren in Spa, they had a lot of downforce on their car because they didn't even have a lower rear wing level than that. So they're super fast through all the high speed stuff, and they get murdered down the straight, and they can't attack where they have the grip because difficulty of overtaking is so high. So definitely low-ish to very low downforce. Maybe not Monza, but low.
Wow.
Well, that sounds interesting to me. How much more, with a high downforce setup for Vegas, even though you're going to sacrifice straightaway speed, will you gain some tire temperature and see some compounding gains there? Not just with having downforce for the corners, but also being able to generate a little more heat. If it's really that cold, will it generate more heat down the straightaway and, kind of have more of a benefit than you would think?
I think that's completely possible, but I think what will end up happening if we're talking about single lap performance, the qualifying sessions are long enough that you let's say on a normal qualifying 3 session, which is 10, 12 minutes, you'll do 2 runs, out lap, fast lap, in lap, new set of tires, refuel the car and go again. You might just seeing them do out lap, slow lap, 3 or 4 of them in a row, and then a single shot at a timed lap. And that way, when it comes to Sunday, you will still have that low downforce rear wing, which means anybody that's put on a higher downforce package that's maybe found 2 or 3 tenths over you through the low speed corners, you're going to fly past them on the straight, and they will have no chance to come back at you through the the low speed twisty sections, because these cars are surprisingly big. And
I've got one more question for you that I've always wanted to ask. When they go to these new tracks and it's so, quick turnaround, we literally just built this racetrack. We dealt with this with Miami. You guys deal with this at all these others. How do they scan these tracks, get the simulation built, the track surface, the grip levels? Like, how do they do that?
Magic
and be accurate enough for you guys to rely on simulation?
I think so. The first thing is it's a street circuit, so there's probably not, like, if there's any elevation changes, like minor elevation changes on this, that will have been surveyed and data will have been gathered by the teams. They've been given engineering drawings, and they start with that, and it's kind of a rudimentary thing. And they're like, well, what do we know about track bumps and track roughness? They will not know that, so they'll make some guesses about what it is. And then after free practice 1, they will have, they've got a lot of accelerometers on the car and on the hubs and everything. They can actually regenerate the road profile to say, right, this is how bumpy the circuit actually is. So do we need to re-optimize our springs and dampers and our center springs and all of that? And they'll run that back through their simulation tools and check the results. But it's going to be one of those things that, considering how bad the grip will be, it's going to be very difficult to judge any of that from the driver feedback to say, oh yeah, the car is a little bit too stiff or it's not riding the bumps. You could figure that out, but can you find half a tenth of a second in grip from optimizing the dampers? And that's going to be what they're playing with.
That's interesting.
Interesting.
As opposed to a track that you guys have known for decades, like Spa. I would imagine their simulation programs know the track surface and grip levels of Spa much more intimately than
track. So I think we could do this all day. Blake, you're awesome.
It's totally
you
possible.
have so much knowledge, man. We'd love to. We do have Cole Custer coming up here in a couple minutes, but before we let you go, I just want to ask you a couple sort of quicker questions that are sort of around the F1 world
answer
right now. Yeah, well, you can give us a little bit more than one word.
2 words.
I'll give you a couple. Yeah, 2. There you go. Everyone's talking about McLaren. Are they for real with this speed that we're seeing? Okay,
absolutely.
Got it.
They're back. Genuinely
interesting. You mentioned Mercedes having the issues down the straights at Brazil. Do they have any fix for this, or is this sort of what we can expect from them on these sort of racetracks? They have to make that compromise.
I think you will see them tending towards the lower downforce end of the spectrum. They've had some updates that they brought out in Austin. Have they gone back to them? Have they been conservative in their setup approach as a result of getting thrown out in Austin for ride heights? I like to pretend that I know what I'm talking about, and some things I do. But in terms of that's you guys know this very well. Racing is chaos, and if you could predict it correctly every weekend, you wouldn't see upsets, you wouldn't see changes. So I enjoy not knowing what's going to happen with Mercedes. I'd like to see them much faster and closer to the front.
All right, and Aston Martin. Obviously, Fernando Alonso looks strong in Brazil. Could they've turned this around? Could this be an opportunity for them in Vegas?
Possibly, yeah. I think since the middle of the season, their car has been a little bit better in terms of top speed. At the start of the season, they were the dog slow car in a straight line with insane levels of downforce. Now, I think we might be seeing them finding their way after a little upset in the middle of the season and finding a way to make this package work that they've got. Brazil was impressive. Brazil was so impressive. And as a result, you saw Lance, who in the last couple of races has been insanely frustrated. All of a sudden, Lance is back up there as well. So it's like when the car's good, Lance can hang on. And, Alonso's flattering it quite a bit. But when the car's terrible, Lance is struggling a bit. So I would like to see Aston back. And that means, hey, we've got basically 5 teams that could be fighting to be on the podium. I like that.
That's awesome. So that leads to my last question, which is something we've done on the Money Lap for the last couple of months. And that is, instead of predicting the winner of the F1 race, because that's not been it's been a pretty easy thing to predict. Who finishes second this weekend? And maybe, or is there a reason Max Verstappen won't win?
I think Ferrari could go well here. I'm happy to be completely wrong, but I think you could see Leclerc on the second step of the podium again, and I'd like to see him back after he needs some help. That boy. Oh my God.
Yeah. Hey, this has been awesome, man. We'd love to have you back.
You guys have been awesome.
Yeah,
I love chatting with people from different backgrounds because we all have the same kind of questions for each other. So I want to pick both of your brains because I've got so many questions right now about your world. So
we've got more time on the show here.
Yeah. Hey there. I got a request. Can you please subscribe, and hit the bell icon below to be alerted to when we post all this great content? And really, it's a pact, because if you do that, then we'll keep posting great content. Also, join us on Wednesdays from 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time for the live show, Money Lap Live. We interview people from around the motorsports world and just talk all things motorsports. It's awesome. Join us there.